standby. The color first.
The views and opinions expressed during this live stream do not necessarily represent the views of Framing the World. Individuals are invited to be interviewed for their unique perspective on specific topics, and not because Framing the World agrees with or endorses all other areas of opinion. Listener discretion is advised.
Unforgiveness from experienced perceived trauma or events that were less than enjoyable for us. If we don't truly release them from ourselves, we actually harbor them somewhere in our bodies. It creates dis-ease in your body, sickness in your body. And then it also, when you see the emotional connection to the unforgiveness, then you want to be comforted. And what do we choose? We choose our favorite comfort foods that are generally sugary, sweet, filled with fat to compensate. And then the two of those marry. And what they do is they create bone loss. They create a myriad of things. But when I come to stability and structure, you can see unforgiveness. The Bible says it says in your bones, right? It says you will have good health and it should be in your bones. He says, and it brings nourishment to your body. But sickness and sick thinking, right? Unbalanced, unrenewed thinking does the same thing.
All right, guys. Well, today
we're recording. Okay,
yeah, let's
here
go.
we go.
Let's do
All right,
this.
here we go.
Today's episode is going to be awesome. We are talking with Rachel Moore. She is a certified nutritional practitioner, and we really appreciate Rachel coming on the program today. Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm very good. And we have another Canadian in the house. We have Shane
Hello.
Jant. So we have a lot of Canadians in the house. I feel outnumbered over here.
Well, Canadians rock. That's why, right? Yeah.
Well, Rachel, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. So my name is Rachel Moore. I'm 45 years old. I live in Hamilton, Ontario. I'm the mother of two grown, beautiful adult children. And what brought me to this conversation is an opportunity to share on some of the myths and misconceptions on health and what the government may be misleading us to believe and has misled us to believe up until now. We have access to some information. So I'm hoping to impart some thought-provoking questions and pray that transformation will begin to stir and become manifest.
Awesome. Well, I know nutrition and health is something that I love to talk about on this show because I think, living a healthy lifestyle, eating healthy foods is one of the most important things we can do. Our bodies are temples of the Holy Ghost. We should, put good food into our bodies and, treat our bodies like they are a temple. And so I appreciate you coming on the program today. Make sure you guys share this video and get the word out about this episode because living healthy is something that we all need to do better on, and it's something that I strive to do every day. It's something you have to try to do because there's a lot of easy ways out. There's a lot of temptation, especially if you live in the city, that you can go and get your junk food fix. And so I really appreciate her coming on the program. Make sure you guys head over to our BitChute and Brighteon channel. We are being heavily censored. In fact, we just got a second strike on our channel yesterday. So our main account has been on pause here for a while. For like 3 months. It's one of the reasons we got the strike is for a video we posted about mandatory vaccines in Massachusetts. And so, they don't want to get the YouTube wants to block this kind of information from getting out. And so we need to start building these alternative platforms such as BitChute and Brighteon. So make sure you guys head over to those channels and support us there. I got only a few videos up on there right now, but we're going to keep getting more and more going every day. And so Shane, where do you want to start this conversation off today, talking about?
Well, I think the one thing is, the nutritional practitioner, holistic nutritional practitioner. A lot of people like to claim that they have that kind of title or whatever, but I think I think I would start by asking Rachel, like, what separates you from all the other people that say they're nutritional practitioners? Like, what makes you different from everybody else?
I'm not certain that I'm different. However, I do have some education. So in Canada, we have the leading school in nutrition. It's called the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. And there's a designation given to those who complete the program. And what we study there is orthomolecular health science. And that really, in basic English, is what we put into our mouth, how it actually resonates with the different cells and systems and organs in the body. And so we can understand the dynamic flow of energy that's given from what we're putting into our mouth or what we're not putting into our mouth. So that designation also offers a special opportunity to be orthomolecular health practitioners, which is seen in accepted in about 26 different countries around the world. So there's an uprising of nutrition awareness and education that's coming into mainstream now. And what I believe is that we all possess a morsel or something of knowledge. This is something that I practice every day. I graduated almost 10 years ago, and I live this lifestyle. So for me, I'm sharing more of my understanding from the education portion, but primarily from my experiences and what I've learned about health through my own journey.
Excellent. So yeah, I obviously I know you, so I'm a little biased with my questioning, but I guess what I wanted to do is just get to the audience to let them know that you that you have that specialized training, right? And so when you look at things, you said you looked at them like at a molecular level, like more like how it resonates, like what you put in your mouth resonates more with how it interacts with your body. So maybe you can explain that a little bit in more detail for us.
Sure. So every single cell, tissue, and organ is fueled by what we eat. And that's not something that we're taught in school, right? And so we have been taught formally the food pyramid, or these are the things we're supposed to eat. But as we can see, dairy's on there. And for a lot of people, we just do not have the enzymes to break down, not just the lactose. So if you go to your doctors, they will often test you to see if you're lactose intolerant. Lactose is a component of dairy, and that's the sugar component of dairy. Where there's two other components of dairy, which are the whey and the casein, which are the proteins, which often people have intolerances to. If we were to take a look at around the world, we are the only mammal, we are the only being on the planet that takes milk from another animal or being and consumes it past infancy. So that's just a simple example of if we are consuming something and we're not understanding how it's affecting systems in the body, it's going to create dis-ease. So when I use the word disease, it's the word disease that we use, but it's creating dis-ease. God created us to have ease and flow, and our bodies will naturally go back into alignment when we're supporting them without hindering them.
All right. Well, what do you do exactly for your job?
So I have a multiple of roles. I also am a crisis intervention worker. So I work in multiple settings throughout the city, but I train on holistic wellness in multiple settings throughout the city. So one of the things I teach is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. I teach NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. And then I marry that with the holistic wellness, on supporting brain foods, and offering some information on what people can do to rebalance their bodies. So it's basically looking at us as believers. We're created as a tripartite being. We are spirit, we are soul, and we are body. And in my experience, the church on the whole has negated an emphasis or an inclusion on how to support and maintain health and wellness in the physical body. And in the scientific world, they look at mental health as being a singular diagnosis, not understanding that there's metabolic and chemical imbalances that can be rebalanced, opposed to just giving pharmaceuticals for life. So there's a component of emotional well-being, there's a component of spiritual well-being, and there's a component of physical well-being as well.
You know, one thing I've noticed is that a lot of Christians are not into health. They could care less about health, and you know, usually when you talk about health, they get glazed over immediately. Why do you think that is?
Twofold. I think that we all know that change can be challenging, and so what we resist persists. We also like our comfort foods, and oftentimes what will happen is that we've been raised on these comfort foods, and we've been going to them for so long that the idea of not having something kind of permeates the mind. So it's just like anybody who's seeking to remove themselves from any kind of addictive behavior, regardless of what it is. It could be food, it could be sex, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be cigarettes, it could be pornography, it could, whatever it is. There's a train in the brain that continues to be hardwired that, hey, when I'm not feeling good, I've already set up some neural pathways to choose some strategies, and oftentimes they're unhealthy. These unhealthy strategies, they're ingrained in the brain so much that when the minute we press on it, the fear, fight, and flight response comes into the person's being because they don't want to lose that strategy, that coping mechanism.
So when like, do you think that people are, like you said, they're like programmed? Is that like media, or is that just like upbringing, or I guess it's probably a combination of everything, right?
Absolutely. Indoctrination begins from infancy. So whether or not the mother breastfed or not, right, and put them right onto formula, it starts right there. So children, our bodies are designed to provide the nourishment that the baby needs and build the immunity right coming out of the womb. God created us in such a magnificent way that we give them colostrum, which builds their immunity. So a mother who chooses not to breastfeed and or chooses to put the baby on formula because they're having a challenge with breastfeeding, immediately that child's immunity is already challenged because their body's not designed to take in these foreign substances. And then this is where we build in intolerances to certain things. So it begins there. But then there's the indoctrination through what our parents believe. So based upon their cultural generational beliefs, we do this because of X. This is the way that it's always been done. Our grandmother and our grandmother and our grandmother's grandmother have done it that way. And then we have social media, then we have the media, we have the influence, we have the government, and then we have pharmacology. At the end of the day, pharmacology is the big money, and they're the ones that are putting down the chain to doctors to prescribe, to diagnose and to prescribe. When people get diagnosed with something, the prognosis should offer opportunities and possibilities for people to choose what's best and right for them. And oftentimes the allopathic industry, which is doctors and pharmacology, only offer their solution. They don't look at alternative medicine. They don't discuss what they're eating or what they're not eating. And they're not discussing other ways to rebalance the body.
So yeah, it's a good point. It actually, today when I was heading over here to see Paul, it's funny you bring up it starts at breastfeeding. I was just listening to something on the radio, and there was an ad for vitamin D drops, and they were saying that you should add that to your breastfeeding regimen. That just a drop, just to give the baby that the sunshine vitamin to the breast milk, and I guess you would just give it to them in water or something like that. But even then, I guess Big Pharma was just trying to push this product that I believe that the mother should be able to produce anyways, right? So it's very interesting that, you know, they're just trying to get them even when they're just so young.
Well, on that one, I'm going to challenge you just a little teeny bit. So, vitamin D production happens naturally in the body, and it's synthesized through our interactions with the sun. And so our bodies naturally do that. But as you may know, there's a bunch of us who may experience what is known as seasonal affective disorder. So going into the winter months where it's darker sooner, we're not getting that same interaction with the sun. And so we're not simulating and creating our own. So during this time between, you know, fall into the spring, many people do supplement with vitamin D drops. So if the mom's not getting it, it's not something that she's able to pass on through the breast milk because she's also being depleted at that time. So the vitamin D drops, this one specific, but you're right, Big Pharma has this kind of big voice where they come in and they suggest, and we see this on television, where they come in and say, do you experience blah, 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 go to your doctor and ask for, all right? So they're really just indoctrinating that subliminally, so that when people's like, yeah, I do have that, and so then they're actually self-prescribing. They actually go into their doctors and they are suggesting what they want, when really and truly they get to be looking at the pathology of disease. So if we've created something in our bodies, my question would be to someone is, what was the pathway? What did I do up until now to create this imbalance? Rather than masking it and treating the symptom, talk to me about the root, right? So if we cut our grass and we have weeds in our grass, then if you just cut your grass, you know the weed's going to come back up. Where in order to get rid of the weeds, we want to dig right down to the root of the weed and then pull it up. And that's the same type of thing, is extracting from the root. Figure out where it is that we got off path, because our bodies are naturally designed to come back into homeostasis. And that's a balance. It's seeking, and it knows how to do that. Without our interference, it will naturally do that. And sometimes we've done something for so long, it may take a regimen of support to rebalance it, because we've been depleting its systems for so long that it actually has become sluggish, and sometimes we've lost the ability of regeneration.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears maybe just slightly. You know, everybody's worried right now about, you know, the coronavirus and how that affects our bodies, and we're all going to die from this virus. You know, I when I first met you, I remember talking to you about, you know, just sickness and just getting sick, and you said, well, if the body's healthy, then it knows what to do with it. So maybe you might want to expand on that.
Okay, great. So, yeah, there's a great book called, it's by Dr. Bernard Jensen, and it talks about the bowel. So the bowels, many people do not understand that they hold microbiome, and they hold great, valuable microbiome that do a ton of work to keep us healthy and balanced. And when it says, there's a quote in there that says, when the terrain of the microbiome, the terrain of your gut is strong, the germ is of no consequence. Because our bodies have natural antiviral, antifungal, and antiseptic. It has everything that it needs. So if our immunity is up, right, if we're operating with a strong immunity, we actually can contract virus, bacterial, fungus, and our bodies know how to deal with it. The challenging thing that we're facing, especially in North America, is that we live on a standard American diet, and it is very sad. That's why it's SAD. It's a sad diet because it's filled with processed foods and sugars, which automatically take, say if we had an army of 100 soldiers in our white blood cells, which are the guys that keep us running and keep our immunity up. If we're depleting their regime consistently through our daily actions, that means when we come into contact with virus or bacteria, we're already working with, a limited amount of warriors. And then if we look at the gut permeability, what happens when we infect ourselves with chemicals, steroids, GMOs, the list is long, all of these processed foods that our body was not designed to simulate, then what happens is we create some challenges in the gut lining, we get inflammation. We can see a lot of men and children looking like they're pregnant. Fat looks different. Fat is soft, pliable, and movable. When we look at some people in the midriff, we can see that it's extended and it's tough. And that's because our gut lining is fields long, like it is. It's if you spread it out. I believe they said some people say tennis court, some people say football field. Either way, it is very long, and so think about all of that intestine being expanded and inflamed, and that's why the men look so robust and they look like they're pregnant. They're carrying some because the inflammation is there, and so one of the things that we can do is we can remove the hindering foods, the things that are creating inflammation. And I don't know if you've heard of leaky gut, but that's where things start pushing through the particles of the intestinal wall, and then the body targets them. And that's where we get a lot of autoimmunity sensitivities. When we went to school, people could eat peanut butter at school. Now, so many children have sensitivity to nuts, shellfish, like the list is so long, and that's because of the gut permeability. It's broken down the walls of the lining, it gets passed into the bloodstream, and then the body targets it like it should not be there. It's a foreign invader. So we have all of these chemical sensitivities, we have nut sensitivities, we have eggs and shellfish. The amount of sensitivities have grown exponentially in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I looked up that book you were talking about. I think it's called Dr. Jensen's Guide to Better Bowel Care. Is that what
That's
the one
the
you're?
one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks interesting. But how worried should we be of the coronavirus?
Well, first of all, as a believer, I don't think fear is of God. So I think operating number one. So the Bible and science both say what you believe you'll receive. So if we're operating in fear, our body naturally responds to fear. So there's two things that happen. Stress produces cortisol, right? And it brings down the body. It's also very acidic in the body, and disease comes from acid in the body. When we look at any disease across the platform, it's all based upon an acid in the blood, a very, very, very acidic bloodline. And the other thing is so that's faith says, if you believe it, you'll receive it. The placebo effect also says, if you believe it, you'll receive it. That the placebo effect says, if I take the sugar pill and I think I'm getting the intended results, I can actually get the intended result, which means there's a power in the mind to manifest what we believe. And that's both biblical and scientific. So number one, if someone is feeling some discomfort or worry or fear, and especially if they're a believer, I would just really ask them to check in. Am I trusting and relying on God? And if I understand that these thoughts will become my words, which will become my actions, the body comes into alignment. The brain is hardwired to be right. So when we say something, our body is going to come alongside us to support us in our belief. So biochemically, that happens. Think about it if you're hungry, right? And you're thinking about the food. Does the mouth not salivate, right? The stomach starts grumbling. These are physiological responses to thoughts, right? And so think about if you're nervous, you might feel jittery, or you might get sweaty palms. These are physiological responses to thoughts. So we understand the power of the brain and how our thoughts affect our body. Number one, I would say dismiss those thoughts, walk in the word, put the word on it. The next thing is there's practical and tactical things that we can do. Remove the hindering foods. Well, I don't know which food, some people might say, but you do know when you're eating a bag of cookies that a bag of cookies is too much. You do know when you're having soda, everybody knows on the planet soda's not good for you. Everybody pretty much on the planet, I would suggest, that knows that fruits and vegetables are generally good for you, like really high. This is not like rocket science here. So replace some of the not so wonderful foods. Put it this way, if it's processed, it's packaged and it comes in plastic, I'm going to suggest that's not the way that God designed it or created it. If you're eating something that it comes in its natural form, the way that God intended, the body will synthesize it, utilize it, and optimize its functioning in the body.
Awesome. Well, if you guys are just tuning in right now, we're talking with Rachel Moore. She is a certified nutritional practitioner. She lives in Canada, so we have a lot of Canadians here tonight. Make sure you guys share this video on your social media account and support us at Framing the World. Shane, what is now? I know you wanted to have Rachel on the program tonight. What is one of the main reasons you would want that you wanted her on?
Am I on?
Yep.
Yeah, the main reason I wanted her on is because she has a wealth of knowledge, in terms of nutrition. And whenever I talk to her, she's always talking about, people aren't getting the nutrition, they're not understanding, right? And now, like, this virus is just, it's captivated like the world, and everybody's they're afraid, they're scared, they don't know what to do. They're looking for a vaccine, they're looking for a medication to come in and deal with everything. And I just go back to when I first talked to her, and she says, if your body's healthy, it will know what to do. So, I just thought that she would be great to just bring on the show and just kind of just share her knowledge, and just kind of, because, maybe it's just me. I think that she sees things a little differently, maybe because of her training than the society sees it. She might say it a little differently, but that's just my opinion. But I think that's why I wanted her on the show.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the things that people can do, Rachel, if they are nervous, are worried about the virus? What are some natural ways to boost our immune system to be ready, just in case we do get the virus?
Okay, great question. So the first thing I would do is start with the mind. And because we are tripartite beings, we are spirit, soul, and body. And so we know the battlefield, especially for us Christians, is in the soul, which is our mind, will, and our emotions. So we really, when Paul tells us to renew our minds daily, we want to start there. Because if we're operating from fear and then we're doing something that can augment a support for ourselves, we're basically putting water in the bucket and then pulling the plug. Water in the bucket and then dumping it out, right? So we want to, number one, shift our mindset to believing God has already provided a wellspring of knowledge and abundance and healing. It's already in existence. However, we were not yet seeing it. We weren't operating in the fullness of God's wisdom. And so start with, God, I trust you. That's where I would begin. Because if you're taking something and you don't believe it's going to be effective, or you're doing something you don't believe it's going to be effective, you're going to be right about it. It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you say, you're hardwired to be right about it. So now you're just going through the checklist. See, told you. See, I knew it. And you're going through I told you it wouldn't work. So the first thing is shifting your mind to being open to, okay, I'm willing to explore possibilities and implement some of these strategies into my life, trusting that God's divinely brought me to this podcast, or this I'm listening to this for a reason, because there's something's going on in my body. And number one, it starts with the fear, which if it's creating an acidic environment and it's triggering fight or flight in my mind, triggering fight and flight shuts down the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where we do rational and logical thinking. So the media, when you're inundating yourself with media that's fear-mongered, then you're feeling the overwhelming effects of fear. Your body goes into fight or flight, and then you shut down the prefrontal cortex where you do logical thinking. So number one, start there. Get into prayer. Ask God to reveal to you. Now, on a practical level, we talked about it, removing harmful and not supportive foods from your body. So anything ask yourself, literally, as you pick something up, if I was to put this in a bucket, the Bible says there's life and death. So, and it says you're not lukewarm, right? Where there's no neutral, and he doesn't want neutral. So that's kind of going 50-50, 50-50. Oh, I'm going to the gym, but then I'm eating junk food, right? They're canceling each other out. There isn't a benefit. So the Bible says, what you put into your mouth, and he wants us to enjoy good health. Like you said, this is the temple of God. So if God's dwelling in me, I'm asking myself, is this benefiting my body? You'll know straight away. Like, you actually know the answer. You don't even need someone to tell you. Pick it up and ask as you're putting the morsel in this. Is this giving the best fuel to my body? Is this honoring my temple? And if you had a, $500,000 car, would you put the cheapest gas in it? Would you put in the cheapest synthetic oil or worst kind of oil? Would you bring it to a undergrad mechanic, right? The reality is we wouldn't do that for our priceless possessions, but somehow we've lost touch of our mind, body, and spirit connection. And God's seeking to have us realign that practically. So if we remove the hindering things, oregano oil, you can get oregano oil for just, I know, a few dollars, like I think $14. And you want something that's in the 90 percentile and up. So 90 to 93%, 98% or 100% oregano oil. You can put 1 drop in a little bit of water and drink that. It is antiviral, like boom, it will knock that stuff out. You can also use sage. Garlic is a natural antibiotic. So you can actually chew on a piece of garlic each day. And if it's too much, slice it up and do a small piece. People are immediately going, well, the smell, there was something back in the day where they came right out and their slogan was, it's horrible, but it works. And so some of these things, some of these items is like, do you want it to work or do you want to smell good? If you're going through a process of getting rid of toxins in your body, you may go through a period of time where you're, expressing through your body and you might not smell the best. That's okay. Lemon balm. Lemon balm you can drink as tea. It's delicious. It's light. It's fragrant. Lemon balm is antiviral. Peppermint. You can buy essential oils peppermint. Revive, Young Living, doTERRA. They all have them. They're therapeutic grade. They're for ingesting. You can put 1 drop in hot water or 2 drops in hot water. That's amphoteric. It's adaptogen. So if you need it to be revitalizing, it revitalizes. If you need it to be calming, it calms. But they're all antiviral. Ginger tea, turmeric. There are echinacea, licorice root. All of these things are antiviral. Some of them are antimicrobial, and some of them are even antifungal. So this means parasites, bacteria, fungus, and viruses. So these are the things that God has already gifted us. Apple cider vinegar. It's going to be organic, and you want the mom inside there. When you see the stuff that floats around in apple cider vinegar, people think it looks gross. That's the mom. She's producing lots of great things in there. You want her. It's perfect. If you take 1 cap and put that in some water every day, that's antimicrobial, antifungal, antiparasitic, cleanses the blood, rejuvenates the liver. Like, it does so many things. It's 1 cap and it's affordable. Costco has it for like $7, a giant one. Mushrooms, cinnamon. There's a whole slew of mushrooms that are very great against cancer. And this is the thing. Pharmacy is not going to tell you about it, right? Pharmacy is just not going to tell you about it. I know that there's a breakthrough happening right now through Numinous. It's a company out of BC that they've got government funding to look into, because the government knows now and they want in on it, but they want to try to patent the product. However, cordyceps, lion's mane, there's so many benefits to these particular mushrooms. They're antiviral, antimicrobial, antifungal, and they're affordable. It's extremely affordable, like $15 for a bottle that will last you, 30 to 45 days.
That's excellent. So yeah, you gave us a lot there to just, a lot of just simple things that you can just pick up, at your health food store and you can use. You mentioned cancer. That seems to be like, the plague of the 20th century. Can you give us some thoughts on that and how you look at cancer differently than, maybe other, people do?
Sure. So what a lot of people don't know is that cancer tumors, before they're detected, generally take years and years to develop. And so from a holistic perspective, we look at preventative medicine. We look at all of the markers before the allopathic doctors are looking. So what they might be looking for is a high white blood cell count, because then that's showing you that you're in this invasion. It's overtaking a particular area. There's a tumor, and then they can see the white blood cells fighting. But oftentimes there's underlying signs and symptoms reoccurring for years before that they have not, or chosen not to, whichever, look at any of those markers for intervention prior to the detection of the tumor. So from a holistic perspective, we say that if something grows, it can also go. So because, again, our bodies are set and predestined to rebalance themselves no matter what we come into contact with. So I do not diagnose, nor do I treat. However, what I aim to do is restore balance to the body. So we know with cancer feeds on sugar. Now, most people think, okay, so then that's white sugar. So we can go white sugar, sodas, those things. But cancer also feeds on gluten. It also feeds on rice. It feeds on anything that's a simple carbohydrate, which means it converts to sugar very quickly, right? It's like a fuel for it. So what we want to do is starve it. And you have to do this for the rest of your life. But to save your life, you may be interested in doing periods of detoxification, get your immunity up, heal your gut, and then go back to moderate eating, removing the whites, white sugar, white salt, and white flour. These things are not the way that God designed them. They're bleached, they're processed, and they do not come from the ground. So if something's been processed, they have all kinds of things in them that our bodies are not systematically designed to deal with. Wheat, as an example, back in the day used to have 5% gluten. Today, because it's been genetically modified, has 50% gluten. Because we want our stuff dense and light, and we want all of the performance things. Tomatoes used to be different sizes, shapes, and colors, and sometimes partially green, and they were still delicious. Apples used to be different sizes. They might even have a little worm poke. Now everything has to look visually pleasing. Everything's got to be the right color. And that's because they've genetically modified them. So when we look at it, we start with choose organic. Use the Clean 15. There's a Clean 15 and a Dirty Dozen list. Every year, the Environmental Working Group shows you this apple, and most apples actually have between 40 and 60 pesticides on them when they're tested. A single apple. So for me, I suggest very strongly on that a Dirty Dozen list, we definitely choose organic for those 12. Then there's a Clean 15 saying these, even if they're not organic and they're conventionally grown, don't necessarily have a ton of sprays on them and a bunch of chemicals on them. You can choose them not organic because they don't have the same amount of contaminants on them. And this is the other thing. It's very affordable to find a local organic grower, and you can have them ship right to your door. Now, is it unconventional? Today to us, because we live in the city and fast-paced environment, it may seem like it is. However, in our ancestors' days, we all had farms, we all farmed, and we all went to the market and we bartered our foods and trade. And they were all grown naturally and organically, not with pesticides, not with herbicides, not with steroids, not with chemicals. So when we go back to the way that God intended for us to consume, our bodies naturally heal.
Well, I always talk about on this show the importance of juicing. Do you know much about juicing, and what are your thoughts on that?
Juicing is a wonderful way to get a powerful powerhouse concentration of nutrients and minerals without putting the burden of responsibility on the gut. So we go back to the gut permeability. We go back to Dr. Jensen's A Guide to Better Bowel Care. He talks about in the gut, because our mind-gut connection is so intricately connected that when we heal the gut, really the rest of the systems kind of get the ripple effect of that. Because when the gut is degraded, we're not absorbing or assimilating. When the gut is degraded, we're having particles pass through the fine walls. When the microvilli in the gut, they don't have docks. The receptor docks are now blunted. So, this particular vitamin, mineral, nutrient wants to land here. It has a specific dock. Well, the dock's shut off. The dock's closed down. The dock's only partially working. It's broken down. Well, juicing allows our body to literally absorb as much as quickly as possible without having to do all the work. So if we're not producing enough or producing too much hydrochloric acid, which is the enzyme that helps break it down and puts it into the bolus before it goes into the intestine, then we're gonna feel that. We're gonna sort that out. We're gonna see that. But it also allows the absorption to multiply because it doesn't have to do all the work. It can go into the bloodstream faster, and you're getting a concentration of nutrients because you're eating it raw, because juicing is raw. And if you're going to look into juicing, you'd like something with a single auger centrifugal. So there are a lot of blenders or juicers and stuff out there. And the one that is going really slow, more of a grinding motion, it doesn't heat the element and burn the nutrients. So if you're going to juice, or if you buy the cold press juice, is where they're literally creating pulp and then they're pressing it. When they see cold press is the optimum. And if you can do that at home, then that's wonderful. If not, you can purchase. I know Omega has a decent line of juicers that are centrifugal single auger.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter and fan of the Norwalk juicer. I definitely talk about that a lot on the show. What do you know about the Gerson therapy, and what are your thoughts on that?
The Gerson therapy, I believe, was very effective. There's numerous documented things in the Journal of Medicine that show that the Gerson therapy was working tremendously for years. And really what that is going back to a very simple regime and juicing and taking out the offending foods. And there's so much literature on it as well, that anybody who's interested, I still believe they have a center in Mexico. So I still believe that there's a Gerson therapy center that still runs. And a lot of people who have been diagnosed with terminally ill diseases have gone through those therapies, even at stage 4, and have reversed those effects in their body and come out and saw themselves experiencing a life filled with joy, blessing, and abundance, simply because they didn't take on that diagnosis. They realized that there was some balancing. When they went through that protocol, what they got to see is it was beneficial, and then they maintained a lifestyle. So this is going to be something around, shifting the mind and really adapting a new regime, because we have been indoctrinated to this fast pace, what's quick and easy. We're busy, busy, busy. We don't take the time to nourish ourselves, and we're certainly not thinking about, if this is fueling my 500,000, my $1 million vessel, is this the best fuel for this, for this journey?
For years, I've been going on and off the Gerson therapy, and there's a support group on Facebook for the Gerson therapy that I'm on, and it's just so amazing, the hundreds and hundreds of people who have been healed, and their lives have been forever changed from just healing their body and juicing and doing the protocol. And I would really encourage everyone to look into that therapy. Is there other therapies or other programs that you know of that you would recommend? This is a 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. I think everybody would benefit from an elimination protocol. And that, what it does is you're going to remove the top 10 the top 10 allergens. So we know that that's shellfish, milk, eggs, soy, nuts, or specifically peanuts, wheat, and then there's a few more other things on that list. So removing those, and then as if you were a brand new baby, if anybody has a baby, they know that when your baby's transitioning from breast milk or formula to pablum, before you begin new foods, it's one new food for 3 or 4 days to see how the baby's body responds to that food. Because if you give them all the foods at the same time, you wouldn't be able to tell if their body was not simulating properly. So you do a reintroduction. So you take it out of your regime for, I would say, at minimum 2 weeks. Everything, all 10 of them, take it out for 2 weeks. So which means you're label reading. It's really intentional to be label reading. Does it have milk ingredients? Did they add that to that? And so when you're doing this and you really scale back to juicing and or fruits and vegetables, you're going to find some clarity of mind. You're going to release some toxins. But when you reintroduce those foods, you will see immediately the effective results. Because this is the analogy that I use, is if my car is dirty and I throw on a handful of dirt onto my dirty car, I can't see it. But if I go through a car wash and I take the exact amount of dirt and I throw that onto my car, it is visible a mile away. So what we understand is that we haven't been caring for our vessels. I would call them not clean.
So what we aim to do is clean them, give them an opportunity to flush out some stuff. So when we bring this back in, you're going to know, did I get itching in my scalp? Did I get, you'll get some rashes, you'll get some symptoms, you'll get some gas, burp, bloating, flatulence. You will get constipation. You'll see it as plain as day. People think belching is a sign of a good meal. No, it's actually not. It's actually your body telling you, I'm having an issue. There's either some improper food combining, right? So say if we ate steak and then we had strawberries right after, like we had a strawberry dessert afterward. So we had a piece of steak and then we had some strawberries after. Well, that meat's going to take hours to digest. Well, the strawberries are ready in like 5 to 15 minutes. So what happens is, think about if you left fruit out in the heat. It starts to ferment. And it starts to get nasty and it starts to get ripe and it starts to say, oh God, like I've been ready for hours. Now it's creating a whole other myriad of issues because those two do not properly food and combine in the stomach. Number one, back in the day, we didn't eat strawberries in the winter because we ate what was in harvest. So we eat strawberries when strawberries are harvested. We eat squash when squash is harvested. We eat greens when they're harvested. And we do a rotation with where we live. Well, now we're shipping stuff from all around the world. We eat whatever we want, whenever we want. That's another thing that creates a challenge for our bodies. It wants to go into a rest and digest. It wants to go into an active state. And we're saying, oh, well, we're going to do whatever we want because we have access to it. So there isn't a one-fits-all program. You and I, we can be the exact same age, born on the same day. We separate, we come back. 2 years later, well, what you did in your year and what I did, or 2 years, and what you did in your 2 years and what I did in my 2 years is going to be a result of, our environment, our toxins, our stress load, how the body manages that, if you have any predispositions. So there isn't a one all fits all, unfortunately. And that's why you do want to, get connected to someone who can take a closer look at you and say what's going on in your body, what's going on in your blood today. What's going on in my body and my blood today isn't what was going on 6 months ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So now getting a look at my systems now, I get to see, oh, okay, good. This one's balancing, but this one's overloaded. So my adrenals can be overloaded. My thyroid might be balancing. Thyroid, you can see, I penciled these in a little, but when you see the third of an eyebrow out on a man or a woman, that's it. It's almost like a dashboard light in a car going on saying thyroid, right? When you see the puff under here or the bags or the blue under here, that's something in your body saying, I'm having a challenging time processing that. So there's something, it's your liver or your stomach is saying it's not well. So it's an indicator. When you see the whites of the eyes all bloodshot and red, it's letting you know B vitamins, stress, that's what that is. Lack of sleep, stress, and your body's depleted in B vitamins. If you see cracked lips, it's dehydration. If you see white on the tongue, it's an overgrowth of yeast. So God has given us like dashboard light signals, but nobody's teaching them. Nobody's teaching them. No one's talking about them. Rosacea on the face, imbalance, right? There's so many imbalances that if we were taught and we understood these things, then we would seemingly make better choices. And unfortunately, our school systems are run by the same people who are run by the same people who are run by the same people, and they all have an agenda, and their agenda is money, it's not for health and well-being of individuals, unfortunately.
Well, one of the things that, I have to constantly remind myself every day is to have a positive attitude. I guess just naturally, I'm just more of a pessimist, and I always remind myself, have a positive attitude, because your attitude really does make a difference in health as well. And I want to ask you about that, as well as forgiveness. Forgiving people who have done you wrong, and trying to eliminate as much stress as you can out of your life. How do those things play a factor in your health?
Great question. So you just hit the nail on the head with that one. Unforgiveness from experience perceived trauma or events that were less than enjoyable for us, if we don't truly release them from ourselves, we actually harbor them somewhere in our bodies. So the liver is the seat of anger, and the breasts for women is nurturing. So if we didn't feel nurtured or we didn't feel protected by our father, if there was a sexual abuse in our childhood that we never released, we never talked about, we kind of just shoved it under the rug and we kept going, you'll find that women will show up with breast cancer more for two reasons. I'm going to touch on that one. Number one, if you're wearing a wired a wired bra to hold up the breast, the wire actually cuts off the circulation from the lymph system. And the lymph system takes toxins out from the body. So if you look at the population of men with breast cancer and then the population of women with breast cancer, it's because we're cutting off the lymph drainage system to take away the aluminum that we put in with our deodorant. Now, they put aluminum in for a stabilizer, and they refuse to acknowledge that the same time that we had bras in aluminum, breast cancer went skyrocketing. And if you look at the direct correlation, anybody can see it. It's factual. But because there's so much money on all of those levels, then we can see that it is not a conversation they're having. So if you're experiencing any of those things, first of all, I offer everybody, if you're a woman, to buy a bra with no wires. Cut the wires out if you have to. Get some new straps. Get something more supportive, higher. Take the bra off as often as you can. Let the lymph drainage do its job, because God built it to take those toxins and to reduce them. But with that cut off, it falls into the breast. It comes from here, comes to go down. It wants to go down, and it stops, and it cups in, and it goes into the breast. So that's the first thing. With unforgiveness, it creates dis-ease in your body, sickness in your body. It creates acid in your body, in your blood, in your bones. And then it also, when you see the emotional connection to the unforgiveness, then you want to be comforted. And what do we choose? We choose our favorite comfort foods that are generally sugary, sweet, filled with fat to compensate. And then the two of those marry. And what they do is they create bone loss. They create a myriad of things. But when I come to stability and structure, you can see unforgiveness. The Bible says it says in your bones, right? It says you will have good health and it should be in your bones. He says, and it brings nourishment to your body. But sickness and sick thinking, right? Unbalanced, unrenewed thinking does the same thing. So, when he says eat and drink to the glory of God, he's really intentional. So when you're doing something to cover your emotions and not be present with what you're feeling, or mundanely, you're just eating because it's there out of habit, these things are numbing effects. They're actually strategies that are employed that have worked so that you don't have to deal with the perceived pain of the event. And what I offer is, if you're willing, this is the analogy I'm going to use. If I broke my wrist, provided this bone wasn't protruding out of my skin and bleeding all over the place, but I broke my bone, it would immediately start to calcify and start to heal without intervention, because that's how divinely created our bodies are. Now, if I was walking around and it healed like this, I can still zip up, I can still eat, but I don't have my full range of motion that God gifted me. So then if I went to the doctor, he's like, well, what happened? I was like, I don't know. I banged it and then it started to heal and now it's very restricted there. And he goes, oh man, you did have a fracture there, but now there's a calcification over it. It's already began to heal. What I'm going to ask you to do is your permission to re-break it, to reset it so that it can heal properly and give you back your range of motion. I submit that each of us, where we have some holding or tension in our bodies or unforgiveness, or we're avoiding that pain, is like God is asking us to go to that very sensitive place one more time, and not to have it rehashed so that you can relive it, that it stays with you forever. However, so that you can go to it, you can author him, the greatest physician on the planet, to come in, re-break that, and offer the healing that has always been available to us And it does require our free will and our submission to him. And that's the piece where people get stuck, is that they get stuck in the willingness to choose to face that past.
One of the a Bible verse that is really interesting to me. It says, "Be angry and sin not, and let not the sun go down upon your wrath." And God says that for a reason, because you don't want to go to bed with all these negative feelings. You really need to every night just kind of let the sun go down and let the sun set, and try to not harbor any bitter or hard feelings towards people as much as possible. I think that will let you live a long and good life. What are some final thoughts, Rachel? Why is living clean and healthy the best way to live your life?
Well, I think it goes back to understanding that God created us spirit, soul, and body. And we know that this is the vessel that we have for the duration of this journey here on the planet. And so when I think about choosing healthy foods and being conscientious of what I put into my mouth, I'm thinking about the longevity that I'll have in this vessel, and also the health that I'll have. But one of the things you'd mentioned earlier is in the body of Christ, we don't see impeccable health. And it's really interesting to me that, we're very quick to judge the world for their smoking, their drinking, and their fornication, and whatever the visual sins that we can see. But we don't address food addiction. We don't address comfort food. We don't address preaching over the pulpit around cheesecake and fried food. And we don't address like people encouraging this or having cafe that sells soda, when we know that that's not honoring the vessel. So when it really comes down to it is, if I'm a servant of the Lord, which I am, I look at, and I take this very seriously. He says, your body is the temple of God. If God was indwelling in you, would you throw junk on him? Would you fill him with junk that makes him sluggish, that makes him out of clarity of mind, confused? And that's what happens. The more sugar you eat, the more of these things you eat, there's confusion in the brain, where God said he is not a God that creates double-mindedness. He is a God that provides clarity. He says, I want you to enjoy good health. He says, I want you to have a cheerful heart and be in good health. He says, do not get drunk on wine. So can you have a glass of wine? But when we're drunk, we're actually putting a burden on the liver, right? So there's just so many things that come down to it. It's like, so really it's about, if what I'm speaking, if God says a sin is thinking about lusting after a man's wife, I believe it applies to all things. If we are thinking sinful thoughts is one thing, because then we can confess our sins and we actually didn't speak them out. But if we speak them out, which you said, a lot of us have had challenges in monitoring this. The Bible says, out of this mouth we speak life or death. And we're going to reap what we sow. So if you're speaking death over your life, you're going to manifest death in your physical body. Now, I don't know about you, but I've watched some people die very painfully who resisted support naturally, chose allopathic ways, went through the chemo, went through the radiation, went through the biopsies, and went through surgeries, and still died. And horribly. It did not look peaceful. It looked painful, and it was horrible. No judgment on those people. When I look at that, that's not something I would like to emulate. When I look at people who eat healthy, they're 80 years old and they're doing headstands, they're swimming, they're running, they're doing triathlons. You know what? You can see the longevity of life that you get. And for me, I want to be here for my great-grandchildren. And so as a steward of this vessel, and if you're a woman or a man of God, then I believe that we are to be stewards of this vessel, right? And the same way we would go out of our way. If someone said to you, your child is not well, this is what it's going to take to rebalance that, you would move heaven and earth to help, make that happen. But we've been so disconnected. I think even the church has done a disservice, and I say that loosely, but in not teaching us to love ourselves. Self-care and self-love, because it's like, be selfless, be selfless, be selfless, don't do anything for, like, we've actually disconnected. No, we get to love ourselves. If we do not put the oxygen mask on first, we're not going to be good for our children and our neighbors. And so this direct contact, and when God says, do you love me? And he said, yes. And I said, I surrender all. He says, including your body? Including your body? Yes. And if the answer is yes, well, what feeds every single tissue, cell, organ, and system is what you put into this vessel. The fuel is what you put in. So if I'm responsible for the fuel, because that's a free will choice, it's a free will choice, then I say, Lord, continue to teach me and let me start somewhere. And so I started somewhere. Start where you can. Start today with one thing, get that under your belt, add something else. Get that under your belt, add something else. Get an accountability partner. Get someone to check in on you. Pray. Get in the Word. Study health in the Bible. There's essential oils in the Bible. There's a ton of stuff. There's so much, actually, not the way that we use them, not the way that they're extracted, but the root, the seed, the leaves, the bark, everything is in the Bible. And if you want to be a good steward, you want to live in good health, then we have an opportunity to choose to love our lives, live in good health, and be wealthy in our physical vessels. And you know what? It says, do unto the world, let your light shine before men so they can see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. I think it's our responsibility as believers to look physically fit. I'm not ripped. I'm not saying ripped. I'm saying healthy. I'm saying healthy. We should be the epitome of health, actually, because we're honoring our vessel. We're being conscientious of what we're putting into our minds and into our ears and into our mouths. Like the Bible says, this is the last thing I'll share. The Bible says we are tripartite beings. It says the spirit is the highest and connected to God, right? And that's why Paul says, renew your mind daily. The soul is where the mind, the will, and the emotions reside, and he gives us free will. So he gives us the choice. But the body is the gateway for lust. What we watch goes into the brain, and it's there. And when you see something, you almost can't unsee it. You can mute it, but it's there. You can dull it, it's there. When you hear something, it's logged in the brain. It's logged in the brain. When you eat something, it's logged in the body. So because we know that our bodies is, I wouldn't say the lowest form, but not the highest form of our tripartite being. And we know that it's the lust, it's what we hear, see, taste, touch, right? All of these things that's where fornication comes in, sexual idolatry comes in. If you look at the sins of the Bible, they're all related to our senses. And when we look at that and we take responsibility for that and we put ourselves in wholeness, if we were viewing ourselves as holistic beings, not just spirits, not just emotional and mental health, but we looked at ourselves, the whole being, because like you said, this affects that, which affects that. Each thing affects each part. And if we look at the church today, unfortunately, many of us are not operating in optimal health. Again, no judgment, but an opportunity for transformation and an upgrade in thinking. And if it's possible, would you choose it?
Hold on. Come on. Okay, so just one quick thought before we get going, Rachel. You'd mentioned something earlier about getting blood work or something like that. So for people that are just like out there and they want to find, somebody like a holistic natural practitioner, how do they find somebody like you, or how would you suggest that they go about, getting that blood test, or they go to their doctor or anything like that? If somebody wants to get really serious with what you're talking about today.
Excellent. So you want to I mean, there's a lot of people online today, and a lot of people can go online and take a simple certificate course. And so I really appreciate the question in the beginning. What you want to know, you can look for someone. There are people that are registered health practitioners. There are people that are certified nutritional practitioners. And so I would suggest that if the government is the source of their education, I would immediately, like when they say, I'm a registered dietitian, right? And so that goes into the same body of the doctrinal beliefs as the government allopathy. So they're going to tell you that you can eat butter and you can eat eggs and you can eat milk. And there's a bunch of things in there that they're going to tell you that you can have that are just simply not working for you at all. And they're not even going to question that they're working for you. So you want to just peruse the person's page. Look to see if you can get some valuable feedback from people. And I do the same thing when I'm looking for resources. There's a way to check out. So look at their resources, check them out, and then listen to the questions they're asking. Are they looking to get to the root? Are they looking to rebalance? The languaging should be very clear. If they're looking to address the root, they're looking at a holistic perspective. So you can do Google searches for that. And you're going to look at someone you want to look at someone who's looking at the root, who's going to work with you at a root level. You'd like to know that they have some level of education. So find out, again, where is the education stemming from? Because the indoctrination, if it comes from the government, is still going to be an allopathic mindset. It's still leaning you into pharmacology. They're not telling you about GMOs. They're not telling you about pesticides. They're not telling you about. So now you have some people who have a minimal education. You want to hear, what do they know about the blood? So unfortunately, if you're in the States, your blood work's a little more expensive. I've had some people, I work with some people over there. You can request a comprehensive blood analysis, which means you also want to include your blood type. So different blood types simulate differently. So a blood type O can break down blood, animal blood, where a blood type A cannot break that blood down. There's very few people that can. So I'm a blood type A. I'm a natural born vegetarian. And what surprised me when I went to education, when I went to school, is when they put that up on the screen, I had a flashback of when I was 8. My mom brought me to the doctors and said, something's wrong with my daughter. She doesn't want to eat. And I was like, but I just want to have vegetables and dip. Like, I was begging for vegetables, but she was forcing me to eat meat because that's what she was indoctrinated to believe was healthy. And she was afraid that I wasn't going to get the food, but I was getting sick from eating red meat. I was getting sick from eating pork. And so I was 8. And I knew, and I didn't know, but I knew that I didn't want it. So I refused to eat it. And my mom would make me sit at the table for 3 and 4 hours thinking like I was just being stubborn. But my body's like, no, don't do it. So if you get a comprehensive blood work, find out your blood type and then do a little research. You can say, eat right for my blood type. And then it will say, hey, these foods are beneficial for you. These foods are actually not beneficial for you. And then work with it and find out what really works with your body. Listen to your body. Your body will tell you. We're infinitely designed. God has created us this way to speak to ourselves. So you'll know when you eat something, did it go down right? Did it feel good? How did you feel after? Did you feel lethargic? Did you feel tired? Did you feel sick? Did you have flatulence? Were you belching, right? Were you have dry mouth? Like, listen to your body, signs, write them down. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm feeling. The other thing is you want to ask for free form T3 and T4. So there's a conversion of thyroid chemicals. And what they're testing in a standard blood work doesn't actually cover free forming to see what's actually happening and what's being converted and what's not. So we get a balance on the thyroid. And then we can take a look at, is the thyroid operating? There's also, the other question is, if you find a practitioner that uses a protocol questionnaire called the NutriBody. The NutriBody is an extensive questionnaire created by David Rawling, and it actually suggests to the practitioner where the imbalances are, just showing almost like on a graph-like chart, showing you this adrenals are unbalanced. Thyroid is unbalanced. There's a presence of aluminum based upon the signs and symptoms that this person, there's a presence of copper, an excess presence of copper. So it will tell you if you're in a good range, a moderate range, or in a high range that's imbalance, creating a myriad of challenges in the body. Because once one system is overloaded, it permeates to another one. It pushes the burden onto something else. And so you'd like to hear that they're using a NutriBody by David Rawling. That's if possible. You'd like to hear that they're going to the root. You'd like to hear that they're using food as your medicine, right? Supplementation, but food. If they're not addressing your food, they're missing a whole regime. If they're not addressing you personally and they have a one-fits-all bucket, that's also, if it's a fast, quick remedy, I promise you it doesn't work. Because not every single person is the same. And what might be good for you today might not be working for you in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so what you want to do is have your practitioner suggest that they need a lot of information from you. The things that I look for when I get a client is I like to see a 7-day food journal. What did you eat? When did you eat it? How did you feel afterward? So I want mood and food. The other thing is I want a comprehensive blood work, including your blood type, the free-forming T3 and T4. And then they usually do a proper white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets. Like you're going to look at coagulation. You're going to look at, so I'm not a blood cell analysis technician, but I can see markers before it goes into their highs and lows. They're like, no, it looks good. No, I don't care what they say. Their markers are different than our markers. Let's take a peek at that. And then we want to do a questionnaire. What is your predisposition? So we can have a genetic predisposition. Does that mean you're guaranteed to have it? No. It means that you have cells that can be activated or has been carried down to you. So then what you want to do is build a wall around it. What you want to do is build immunity and support around your predisposition. And then lastly, what you want to do is you want to hear some supplementation. So if I've been depleted in something, so I'll use chromium. Chromium is a gatekeeper. It helps cells transition the process. And so chromium, if there's a low level of chromium, that can affect a lot of systems. If you are having an imbalance of your electrolytes, right? That's calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and there's one more. It's not coming to me right at this moment, but there's 4 or 5 of them. And all of these have a function with regeneration of cells. So cells have a time limit and they have a process and they have a way of doing things. And if for some reason you're low in something or you have excess of something, the process of the cell regeneration changes. And so that's really going to matter to people who have chronic disease, because the cell rejuvenation, if that cell is dying, it reproduces to dying cells. If the cell is rejuvenating and becoming healthier, even though it was dying previously, now it's building back up. Now it's producing 2 healthier cells, right? So that has the ability to rejuvenate itself on the upward scale. So there isn't, again, I apologize that there isn't a carte blanche answer, because the World Wide Web keeps us wide open. What I say is pray and ask the Holy Spirit to lead you. Be diligent in following and trusting. When you find a good practitioner, stick with the practitioner, work your way through it, and give yourself, I would suggest, 8 to 12 weeks to really get a full view on the outcomes. Because as we're detoxifying, a lot of the toxins will come out, so you may not feel great going through the healing process, right? Some of these things have been buried in your system for years and years and years, and when you're going through a detoxification process, first of all, you're going to go through some withdrawals. You're going to go through some withdrawals from coffee, from sugar, from your natural go-to, and then you're going to go through some emotional withdrawals, because this has been a coping strategy for a very long time. Stick on the journey, trust in yourself, continue to be diligent, keep rising, keep looking, keep reading, keep implementing, and release the toxic and negative thoughts. It begins in the brain. When Paul says renew your mind daily, he really meant it. So get into the Word. Find somebody, whether it's a podcast or Instagram page or Facebook page, find somebody that is in alignment with rising up and health, and you'll continue to find resources that will augment and support you. And I believe it's possible because I've worked with many people, and I too have been on this journey because I wasn't well, and I started with one thing, and now I'm, in a different place 10 years later.
Well, knowledge is power, and I appreciate you coming on the show today and giving us your knowledge, because it's been a fascinating interview, Rachel. I appreciate you coming on. Do you have a website or a way that people can get a hold of you if they have any questions?
Sure. So my website is actually under construction at this time, but I can be reached. I have 2 platforms on Facebook. It's Rachel Moore, and you can search that by using my email, which is lovetolive@live.com. So that's lovetolive@live.com. So that's my email, and you can use that to find me on Facebook. And then there's also a Facebook page called Love to Live. And then on Instagram, I have Love to Live Wellness.
Awesome. Well, awesome interview. I think it went well, huh, Shane? What do you think? Oh,
Yeah, it was great. I think it went very well.
yeah.
So she's a wealth of knowledge. There's a lot more questions, but we'd be here all night. So
Yeah, I mean, we could talk to you, Rachel, for hours and hours. I had some more questions about the Gerson therapy. I wanted to get into coffee enemas tonight, but I had to hold myself
I use
back.
coffee enemas. I love coffee enemas.
You do? Oh, maybe we
Yeah.
should get into it. Okay, one more thing. Man, we were wrapping this up.
hold on.
Does it matter that I took my shirt off? Should I put it back on?
No, you're fine. Leave it off. No, I have been getting so much flack, and we just thought we were wrapping up this episode, but we're going into overtime.
Yeah.
No. We can't talk long. We're wrapping this up, guys. A lot of people give me flack for believing in coffee enemas, but I love them, and they just make you feel great. And, what are your thoughts, Rachel?
They are fabulous.
Yes.
So I personally use them myself, and I've been using them for almost 10 years. So what they do is they're astringent. Coffee is astringent, it's cleansing, and it's also invigorating. And when you use an enema, because it's not forced water, it goes in and it flows up through the colon and into the intestines. And what it does is it kind of just flushes out the system, and it cleans it out in such a way that when it gets up to the hepatic valve, what it does is it's very stimulating. And so it's invigorating, and it flushes out the toxins in the wall. Often one of the toxins that would be in that wall would be an overgrowth of yeast. And that was what we know and we would attribute to Candida-itis or Candida albicans. And so a healthy colon is one of the best things that you want, because in our colons is where we absorb our water-soluble vitamins. It also, if we have impacted feces inside the walls, it actually flushes that out. It starts to loosen it up. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard, but there's also colon hydrotherapy, which is a soft generation of water that is a forced pressure, but it actually goes up a little farther. And I even think those are great to do biannually. I wouldn't do it biannually. I would do it maybe once. I wouldn't even say quarterly. I would say once or twice a year. And if you're in a heavy diseased state, I would suggest more frequently. So you can purchase a package and maybe do 3 intensely. And again, that's going to flush out anything that's there. I have read some people who do the colon hydrotherapy have released 20 pounds of fecal matter that has been encrusted into their intestines.
Yeah, well, I've been going strong lately, and I've lost at least 20 pounds since I've been here.
Really?
Crazy. Yeah, 20 pounds. Look how skinny I am now. I used to have a gut. Like, it's just juicing and doing them. Yeah. Well, Rachel, that's it. We appreciate you coming on. You are awesome. And thank you, Shane, for letting us know about Rachel.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad that she was able to share with us her knowledge.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel. I hope you have a good night, and God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
All right. Well, that was Rachel Moore. Guys, This show's awesome just because you can talk to cool people like Rachel and get, pick her brain and just hear different kind of points of view. Everyone has a different outlook on life, and everyone, has different knowledge. And so I appreciate Rachel coming on the program today. Make sure you guys head over to our alternative sites, Brighteon and BitChute, and support us over there, guys. We are getting hit hard on censorship, and we need you guys to support us on Patreon and those other sites. And make sure you check out our new products that we got on the store. We have wild-crafted oregano. We have the flu shot. We have elderberry syrup, and we have migraine relief, all natural products on our store. Check it out, framingtheworld.com. It's been a good show. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Framing the World. Also, check the video description for our backup channels. Bye, guys.